I'm too nostalgic, I'll admit it.
We graduated 4 months ago. What can you possibly be nostalgic for?
I'm nostalgic for conversations I had yesterday. I've begun reminiscing events before they even occur. I'm reminiscing this right now. I can't go to the bar because I've already looked back in it in my memory, and I didn't have a good time.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. It's time for another comic book retrospective, and this week we decided to talk about Amazing Spider-Man, The Death of the Stacys. We're going to cover the death of George Stacy and the death of Gwen Stacy, two classic Spider-Man stories. A lot of fun. Well, okay, this isn't the most fun things in the world. There's a lot of action, but there's certainly a lot of consequences, and really, as Eric Breen put it recently, it's the end of innocence as far as Marvel Comics, specifically with the death of Gwen Stacy. Eric, what were your thoughts reading this for the first time? Was this mind-blowing stuff? Could you believe that they would kill off a major character like George Stacy and then kind of follow it up with an even bigger character? Maybe possibly at the time, people thought that was the love of Peter Parker's life.
Well, these stories do predate me as a reader, so I'd known the outcome when I did read them. So it wasn't so much a can I believe they did it, because obviously they did, but the way the stories unfolded, it was like they found really interesting ways to do it. And the fact that when I did start reading, one story was about 5 years old and the other one was a couple years old, and both characters were still dead. So that told me that, yeah, this is real. And they were emotional, because I said, if you don't get emotional over stuff you read in the hobby, why are you in it? So yeah, they definitely packed a punch, both stories.
So Joe, what's going on in comics around this time? These are some pretty monumental events. Now, death doesn't seem to mean as much in comic books these days, but these are two deaths that have pretty much stayed permanently. Although, Gwen Stacy has returned from like another multiverse.
Yeah. I mean, this is an interesting time in comics. This is some of the earliest Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams collaborations going on right now. I believe it was Detective Comics 403 happened, which very early in that. This also came out. Amazing Spider-Man 88 came out. I believe it was it was the same month as Fantastic Four 102, which was the last Jack Kirby issue where he was the full-time artist on it. They had recycled some art for later issues, but that was the last issue Jack did happen here. So this is like, there's quite a few really interesting pieces going on here. Carrie Bates had started taking the reins on Legion of Superheroes, and he was becoming a really big deal over at DC. Julie Schwartz was really taken by Carrie, and that was the start of what would later become, a big career. Carrie was writing a lot of stuff across the Superman office, the Flash, all through the 70s. And I know I've beaten this dead horse before, but he's been memory hold. A lot of people forget Carrie Bates, but if you were reading DC Comics in the 70s, it would be nearly impossible to avoid Carrie Bates' name in a comic. He was like just someone who was getting a ton of work there.
Very important time in comic books. These are two, like we said, impactful stories. Great stuff going on here. We've got the immortal Stan Lee on writing duties for Spider-Man 88 through 90, which is going to be the death of George Stacy. We've also got John Romita Sr. as the artist of Spider-Man 88 specifically. He does the inks, I believe, on the other two issues. The first issue is The Arms of Dr. Octopus. And as we start out, Doc Ock is in prison, and they've decided to put up his tentacles like on display at a museum. Doc Ock has a connection to those arms, and he starts controlling them, and they're going to come and free him. Spider-Man sees what's going on. He tries to stop him, but a building is about to come down, and he has to go and save the people. And the Doc Ock's arms continue on to the prison. Good stuff here, Eric. Really good opening.
The opening, like I said, they're in a natural history museum with mechanical arms on display, and Doc's a couple states away, and he's got the mental acumen to make them move to come to meet him. Like I said, the arms, knock a building over, and he has to save him. And then he gets to formulate his plan for what he's going to do now that he's been reunited with his arms. And that comes in the form of visiting dignitary from a group of Chinese delegates that are coming in for a conference. And in those days, everybody was protesting everything. So, of course, you had the people protesting for and against General Su, which was his name. And that all culminated on the plane. If anybody wants to take over from there.
So, Joe, before that, Peter actually goes home. He needs to study. He falls asleep, and we get a little subplot that we know has been running through Spider-Man for quite a while. And he has to visit his professor, and is told, "Hey, listen, your grades are dropping. Obviously, the stresses of Spider-Man are affecting Peter Parker in his personal life, and he needs to kind of ship up. But he's so tired, he can't do it."
Yeah, no, and that kind of plot will kind of revisit of Spider-Man maybe not being in the best shape to take on the challenges he's doing, and it leading to something catastrophic. One part I did forget before I was going to mention was this was also during the secret agent years of Wonder Woman, where she was depowered and was doing more street level crime fighting. Which Denny O'Neil is also doing a lot of the writing of. So this is still early Denny at DC. He's barely started doing some stuff on like Detective Comics. This is a year, not a full year, but this is months before Kryptonite Nevermore starts. So yeah, just also adding that to the perspective here. But yeah, he has the bit with the college professor, and Gwen is is cheering him up, but he's still grumpy, which is something that happens a lot. And then we get the reunion of the arms with Doc Ock, and then we start seeing the whole plan come together. Conveniently, J. Jonah Jameson is also on the plane with this dignitary that Doc Ock is targeting. An interesting note, I think, is, again, I love this story and all that. A sense of time and distance is a little warped here with how quickly the arms somehow managed to get to Doc Ock and break him out and him to get there. But, that plane must have been just sitting there for quite a while for
waiting for
just waiting for waiting for them to get there. But yeah, they're talking here about what was it? It's that this is like talking a little
$10 million.
Yes, $10 million. But this is they're talking about international relations while Peter's looking bad for blowing off people about the air pollution and the environment protests and all that, which is weird.
Getting ahead of your protests. That's not for two more issues. We're protesting the general in '88.
Right. They're protesting the general. Yeah. But they are protesting. There's a lot of protests. It's hard to keep track of them.
I believe I said that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. But yeah, but which is weird because this is before comics got political. But it's yeah. So they're doing that. There is. Let's see.
Peter is essentially on the scene to cover it for the Daily Bugle.
Yeah, he has to get there with. He goes there with. He has to go through the protests with. Was it Robert Robertson? Yeah, Joe Robertson.
Yeah, and when when he's there to cover, General Su, and Doc Ock formulates this plan on the fly. He hears about it and he goes, "Oh, that's a But real quick, the professor that talks to Peter about his grades is Professor Warren.
Yeah.
And longtime readers know what ended up becoming of Professor Warren.
Yes.
So that character did not come out of nowhere. In fact, I think he might have even been in a Ditko issue. It was little used, but he ended up playing a much larger role.
Yeah, absolutely. Also tied to Gwen Stacy there, but
Yes.
but yeah, Ditko did a lot of setting that stuff up, and God, there must have been. I think they started college in issue 31, so Ditko would have done like 8 issues of them in college. Yeah.
Yeah, he introduced Gwen and Harry in the same issue. But yeah, once they're on the plane, Spider-Man has to sneak off, obviously, and Peter has to sneak off, become Spider-Man, and he fights Ock. And,
wonderful action scene.
Yeah. And what he's able to do is, web his eyes shut, so he's fighting blind, and that allows him to get everybody off the plane. And Doc Ock allegedly tries to take off in the plane, and it explodes.
Yeah.
So he turns it on. Let's go down the runway. Spidey jumps off, and everyone thinks Doc Ock is finally dead.
But he didn't do his job and get those pictures for JJ.
Yep. He dropped the ball on that one. This is an exciting issue, and there are amazing like blockbuster action sequences in all 3 of these issues between Peter Parker and Doc Ock. Like they're going at it in every single one of these. It's definitely one of the big highlights.
Oh yeah, and this is the what was it? We get right after this, we get to some Gil Kane on.
Yes, Gil Kane with John Romita Sr. inking him, obviously Stan Lee. This is Doc Ock lives in Spider-Man 89. And everyone thinks that Doc Ock is dead. It's in the papers, but Peter Parker realizes they didn't find a trace of Doc Ock, and he's worried, essentially, that he might not be dead. Like, what's going to happen? He might not be dead. And then Randy Robertson, a friend of his, approaches him and wants him to protest with him. And he's like, oh, damn it, I need to go find out what's up with Doc Ock. And he can't do it. And he basically he's like, you're selfish. Like, what are you doing? And so you have the most selfless character in Marvel Comics history being called selfish, and he can't even defend himself, Breen.
Yeah, and real quick before we get to that, in issue 88, we forgot to mention that there is a scene between Peter and Captain Stacy where an issue before this storyline, Peter's got a fever, he's got the flu, and he shows up at Gwen's birthday party as Peter Parker holding the Spider-Man mask, confessing to them. And when he finally ends up in the hospital and finds out it's just the flu, he has to get Hobie Brown, who's the Prowler, to impersonate him to get the trail back off of him. And when he's talking to Captain Stacy in issue 88, he's wondering, he goes, does he suspect? Yeah, because he knows how smart and sharp this man is. So that seed is planted again where, did he buy my thing? And I can't shake the feeling that he knows more than he's letting on. But yeah, in issue 89, I mean, I look at this issue as, you have the setup in 88, the payoff in 90. 89 is just pretty much a battle issue where he knows, like when he's reading the paper and he has the altercation with, the conversation with Randy, throws the paper away, and then you see the tentacle pick up the paper, and then he gets the idea to get Spider-Man's attention and further his goals by knocking out a power grid. And that leads to a battle, which I think is, if nothing else, just an excuse to let Gil Kane show off, because they know that there's big doings in issue 90. I think this is just, like I said, a battle issue that you can just enjoy reading and watching it unfold.
But there's also some little subtle things, like I mentioned, the being accused of being a selfish person, even though he's completely selfless, can't explain himself. There's also the continuation of the J. Jonah Jameson Spider-Man is a menace as he's swinging by the Daily Bugle, and J. Jonah Jameson's telling Joe Robinson, we got to do something about that menace. He's like, he's done nothing. He's like, he can't do anything about it. Then we obviously do get to the big climax where Doc Ock is climbing this power grid, and Peter Parker essentially ambushes him, right, Joe? That's the way I take it.
Yeah, another thing here too to keep in mind. We're about 10 years, a little over 10 years into Spider-Man. Not at this point. Wait, we're like 7 change years at this point. I was jumping ahead to the next bit, but we're 7 and change years into Spider-Man existing. And you can still, I'm pretty sure you can still count on one hand how many artists have penciled Amazing Spider-Man. Because you got Ditko, John Romita Sr., Jim Mooney had helped John Romita. You had John Buscema fill in some issues, and now you have Gil Kane. I think that's all the people who penciled Amazing at this point. And it's, try to think now in the past, like even couple of decades, if you can think of a run on a major character that's over 7 years that you could count on one hand how many people penciled it.
Invincible was the one penciler the entire time, but
yeah, I'm thinking, well, like not the entire time.
Right?
There was
it wasn't. I thought it was Otley the whole time.
I think Otley came. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah, but I'm thinking like Big Two.
That's not a big. Yeah, it's a big character right now because of the show. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah,
and this is a spectacular fight. It's even ups the game from the one we got in the airplane for the time before. Everything's going on, and then this time, Spidey, they're fighting, and he sees that the protesters are below, that he wasn't able to join because he's not selfish. He was having to look out for everybody, and I think that it's a water tower is falling over, and he gets trapped underneath there, almost reminiscent of the time that he's basically got a building collapsed underneath him, and he has to kind of have the wherewithal and the resolve to not let it fall over on these people and kill these protesters, and it leaves him very vulnerable.
Yeah, and I mean, you're watching this whole thing, and I mean, I know that Breen and I were gushing over Gil Kane, the last retrospective with the Action Comics stuff, but Gil Kane, like, he just elevates that. Like, it's crazy. You look at all the unique poses throughout the whole issue of just Spider-Man, like not even Doc Ock, not even the tentacles, just Spider-Man. Arched and twisted, and he's jumping around. I mean, and some of these layout choices, you just look and like that, like, what was it, like 3/4 page splash on page 6 of, the Spider-Man in the background, like, and then just all the different illustrations of him jumping around. Like, it is so gorgeous. I love page 8. Again, where, swinging around and showing them coming at you, going for Doc Ock, seeing Doc Ock in the distance, really getting that sense of, depth and distance. Gil is such a master at the craft. It is just gorgeous to see.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. This is one of the most kinetic comic book issues I've ever seen, Breed. Every panel is in motion. People are moving. It's so chaotic. It's just it's wonderful to watch this action.
Yeah, and he's able to push the water tower away to make sure everybody's okay, which leaves him vulnerable to Doc's next attack, which culminates in what you don't often see is the full page splash on the last page. Mm-hmm. Of Spider-Man seemingly falling to his doom.
So gorgeous. This is like my favorite page. It's somewhat simple, but I was scared to fall myself. It's just beautifully rendered, and it looks like Spider-Man is absolutely in peril, even though he's got his web shooters and everything.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, no, it's gorgeous, and you look at just the perspective. You look at all the people gathered on the street, and it really looks like they put the time in to be like, well, how small would they be if, Spider-Man's X amount of stories in the air? Like, this does not look like a rush job. This looks like they really, put in the care into this issue.
So that's the big cliffhanger. And the cliffhanger in issue 1 was Doc Ock's dead. He wasn't. The cliffhanger, well, not issue 88. 89 is this Death of Spider-Man. Obviously, it's all going to culminate in issue 90, so he is alive. And this one has a fantastic cover. If you didn't know it going in. You know somebody's going to die, but you don't know who it is. It's clear by the cover that there's somebody has passed away, and they might blame Spider-Man for it. Spider-Man 90, Stan Lee, Gil Kane once again, penciling, John Romita Sr. inking, and this is called And Death Shall Come. Picks up right where the last issue leaves off, and we see Spider-Man. He webs up one of Doc Ock's arms, swings through a window, and he's avoiding him and all that stuff. And I think he throws a tracer on him or something like that. Lots of fun stuff. And you know right away he didn't die, Eric.
No. And that's cool when he's in that vent and the arms stop just before they get to him and he gives up. And yeah, like you said, he puts the tracer on him, and we see how that plays out. And
yeah,
I said this is another issue that does not waste any time. But Peter knows if he's going to beat him, he's got to come up with something, because he's still
there's something before that.
Well, I would say he's still feeling the effects of the flu he had for several issues. So
he walks out of this building and he runs into Captain Stacy, and he's like, "Are you okay?" He's all stumbling around, and eventually passes out in his arms.
But the way they build that up too, on the bottom of page 5, again, Gil being a master, those 4 panels really stressing the agony that Peter is in there. And before that, one of my favorite pages in this issue is page 2. Just all the action, that panel 5, smashing through the glass, it's, oh my God, it's crazy. And there were some really good panels that evoke that, Kirby crackle and giant, sound effects in the last issue too. But yeah, it is, you're really getting that sense of, dread, that sense that Peter's really pushed himself too far in this issue in just a few pages.
And you're right. Said what the part that I left out, where he gets taken back to the Stacy's house, where he wakes up and Gwen's doting on him, and what would have to be just he's going, okay, this is my excuse to get out of the protest, and also said, but I'm going to leave this gorgeous girl that's taking care of me, and nobody will be suspicious that I would rather go home and recover by myself.
Well, there's also a moment where Captain Stacy's just like, wow, your recuperative abilities is nothing amazing. I've ever seen.
And then he says, "Does he suspect?
What did he just say? Does he know? He is a detective. What's going on here?" And really starting to lay the groundwork that George Stacy, there's a good chance he might know who Peter Parker is. Like you mentioned, he goes back to his apartment. He needs something. He's fought Doc Ock twice. He thought he killed him once. He almost died the second time. He needs something. So he kind of decides to whip up a new, what is it, web fluid? Is that what you call it?
With a property that will disrupt the arms from being able to communicate, Doc from being able to communicate with the arms. Now, this is before when he finishes this, because now they're protesting air pollution. They've moved on to the next protest. And did anybody notice when he leaves, before he leaves to go fight Doc Ock, he checks in on Harry, who for an inexplicable reason is fast asleep at 7:30 at night, and he hadn't been on drugs yet. So everybody else is protesting. Remember, Peter was a big heel for not protesting. Apparently nobody cared that Harry was going to bed at 7:30, but it's a minor detail.
Yeah, whatever. But no, it's and when you're looking through this, especially you go into pages 10 and 11, I think it's very clear that artists like Todd McFarlane were heavily inspired by Gil Kane on Spider-Man. Compared to a lot of the other artists. And that's not taking away from other artists. I love a lot of the other artists that did work on Spider-Man. But you look at these pages and you're like, oh, yeah, Todd definitely pulled a lot from Gil Kane when he took over Spider-Man.
I've got to say this, Joe. Reading these, it almost feels like maybe sticking with the more basic color palette that they used to have, and maybe not so much blending and everything, might have enhanced the art back then. I almost like it better, where it's more vibrant and kind of pops more. When you see a lot of stuff nowadays is just so muddied up because there's too much color in it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Sometimes it gets so muddied, it doesn't like feel like a comic that you're reading anymore. And then you read something like this, and you're like, oh, thanks, it's comic.
Yeah, look how amazing Spider-Man looks when he's going through the city. He just pops out. He's off the page. You don't really get that as much anymore. Let's get into this final confrontation. This is good stuff. Obviously, it's the third confrontation between the two characters in this final issue. And he's got the spider tracker. It's on Doc Ock. He finally starts getting some signals up. He goes after him. But it turns out Doc Ock is lying in wait. It's a trap, and he goes after him. And Peter finally does spray him with this new web formula, and it throws him off. Everything goes haywire, Eric Breen, and he just starts breaking everything on accident.
Yeah, they're obviously up on a high rooftop again, and Doc loses control of his arms, and he ends up knocking a chimney off of a roof. The debris starts coming down, and there's a little boy standing there. Love to know where his mother was or his father, but he's out there by himself, and George, rushes to push him out of the way, and says, please, Lord, let me be in time to save this boy. Boys push the safety. The debris lands on him. And Spider-Man sees what's happened, and by this time I think he's won the fight, and he rushes to help Captain Stacy, and pulls the debris off of him, and says, "I'll get you help." And he goes, "I'm done for." And he goes, "Well, the hospital's next door. I can get you there." And he picks him up and he carries him off. Of course, everybody thinks he killed him, and look, he's carrying him off. And so he takes him to the rooftop, and he goes, "Stop, please." He goes, "There's so little time, and I have so much to tell you." And he goes, "After I'm gone, there'll be no one left to look after Gwen. No one, Peter, except you." And he goes, "Be good to her, son. She loves you so very much." And I still get, I get goosebumps just, telling it right now. It was so well done. And obviously Peter goes, he knew this whole time and never gave me away. And it was just, I said it, this was 1970. And again, you didn't get that stuff in comics until now. That might have been the first just absolute tearjerker moment that comics had ever done. And I said, it's just tremendous. And a quick aside, I read this for the first time sometime in 1976. It was about 1 month later that in The Incredible Hulk, that's how they killed Jarella, the green woman from the microverse that had fallen in love with the Hulk, and vice versa. Saving a little boy as debris from a Hulk battle with Crypto Man was falling, and she gets the little boy out of the way, and it lands on her. So that was I saw two stories end that way within a month of each other. But this was, I said, fantastic ending.
As a writer, Joe, this is what you want from your readers. Like, this is not only a gut punch, but you're emotionally invested in the story, and something's been taken with you, and you feel for Peter. You feel for Glenn. You've emotionally invested in these characters. Yep. And the loss is real.
Well, it's real for multiple reasons here. It's real because in the end, the true hero was Captain Stacy, because Captain Stacy acted on instinct to save someone. Peter went home and had to, formulate a plan, had to develop something to beat Doc Ock so he wouldn't get hurt. That's what he was doing. Whereas Captain Stacy, it didn't matter if he was putting his life on the line or not. He just had to do the right thing. So in the end, the real hero is Captain Stacy. And on top of that, it's another situation where Spider-Man indirectly kills his father figure. Captain Stacy, isn't obviously not the same kind of father figure as Uncle Ben, but was kind of starting to fill that role, because a lot of the other people in his life who were older men either hated him or became supervillains. So so here is an instance where he again accidentally killed or indirectly, you know, it's obviously if Spider-Man had not made Doc Ock lose control of his arms, that event wouldn't have happened that way. And the way this is executed, Stan doesn't beat you over the head with it. There isn't like a big thing at the end of the issue where, you know, it's like, egads, you know, Peter once again kills his father figure. Like they don't do that. And I think, again, a lot of people who aren't familiar with this like era in comics think it's all hokey, think that there's no subtlety, but there's a lot of subtlety in these issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Guilt has always played a major role in Peter Parker and Spider-Man's life. Mm-hmm. And going back literally to AF-15, things that you could have done differently, but you don't know if it would have, maybe more so in AF-15 if he'd stopped the burglar, but chances are he gets out on bail and does the same thing, but we'll never know. Same thing with this. If he doesn't create that web formula, the battle could have gone the same way with the same outcome, but it didn't. So there's enough in Peter's mind to play on that guilt that he's carried with him for various reasons throughout the run of the title. And Stan was masterful at doing that, because I said that, it's like, he's dead and Spider-Man killed him, which obviously is the guilt talking, but he has a tendency to say that in front of police officers, as we'll find out a little bit later today in this, our reviews. But yeah, it's just, like I said, this stuff is just so good and it's just so ahead of its time compared to what other comics were doing. And it might seem hokey by today's readers, but for them, I would say you're missing it. If you think
hokey about that story. It's just the art alone is mind blowing. Then you throw the story on there, the execution with the major loss in in another development for Spider-Man as a character. Is wow, it's a showstopper, and somehow they kind of top it in 3 years.
Yeah, and between this story and then the one we're about to talk about in Amazing 122, you could call him Guilt Kane.
Absolutely, he's got a lot to do with it. So let's get into Amazing Spider-Man 121, 122, The Death of Gwen Stacy. This is released between June and July 1973. The writer, so on the first story, we have a grizzled veteran, Stan Lee. It has certainly honed his craft and was an enormous name in comic books by this time. This time we have a younger fella by the name of Gerry Conway. How old is he, Eric Breen? Is he 20 here even?
Just over 20.
Yeah, so just turned 20. Somewhat green, but certainly knows the Marvel Comics universe. Pretty damn good writer, as he'll point out, or as you'll find out here in the story. Gil Kane, once again, is the penciler. John Romita Sr. and Tony Mortellaro are the inkers on this one. The first issue, aptly named The Night Gwen Stacy Died, Amazing Spider-Man 121. And this is kind of picking up right off of a big story arc where Harry Osborn is relapsed. He's on LSD. He's in the hospital recovering, and Spider-Man's kind of watching outside the window. And then he hears the doctor tell Gwen and MJ that he's had a relapse. And so he decides he needs to go in there and check in on his friends. And it does not go well for him, Eric.
Well, he's not in the hospital. He should be in the hospital, but Norman used his connections to have the care brought to him. So that's
hospice care.
Well, that kind of plays into this story that Norman he's racked with guilt over what's happened to his son, and he wants him right there with him. And Peter goes into, he starts off outside the window of Spider-Man, goes in to check. Gwen and Mary Jane are there, and Norman confronts Peter and basically said, "You're not welcome here. Get out." And he
blames him for what Harry's done, as if Peter is the big druggie of the group.
Well, he does, but at this particular time, and he kicks Mary Jane and Gwen out also, and then he's racked with his own guilt because at this point he has not the memories haven't surfaced, but they're starting to again. So he's kind of conflicted, But I said he blames himself as much as he does them, if not more. And then we don't know.
Yeah, the pressure's getting too much for him here, Joe.
Yes.
The Green Goblin persona is starting to come out. And then he's sitting with the sun. He starts having his hallucinations because he feels like he's failed him. And he sees Spider-Man like come after him. And after this, he starts remembering where all of his Green Goblin gear is. And he finally emerges as the Green Goblin after all of this trauma that he's experiencing with his son. I guess dead set on kidnapping Gwen Stacy? What a villain.
Yeah, and, well, I mean, this is also our first time seeing the Green Goblin back in a couple years or so at this point.
96, 7, and 8.
Yeah, so 96, 7, and 8. Yeah, and this is 121. So yeah,
And
a
the
couple
Green
years.
Goblin knows who Spider-Man is.
Yeah.
It's just that Norman Osborn has forgotten.
Yeah, and now he's remembering, and again, you get so many dynamic pages. You know, it's like even if you don't read it and you're just flipping through the pages, you're just like, oh my god, like Gil's faces, just everything. They're so expressive, and yeah, I mean, you're getting that. You know, Norman's getting his memory back. Peter's terrified at the notion that this could be happening. Like you're looking around. Like page 4, there's that great like close up of Peter's face, you know, with the, you know, just being terrified, thinking about all this stuff happening. Mary Jane's upset with him, you know, kind of blaming him a bit for getting him kicked out. But it all feels like normal interactions with people, like Gerry Conway tackling these characters in this book. I mean, at the time, like Gerry Conway was also obviously a big Spider-Man fan. Leading up to this, there was a great like Hulk 2-parter. We had like Doc Ock return. There was a whole, you know, trying to get married to Aunt May. Like there's a lot of like fun, interesting stuff here. And then you really get hit with this kind of out of nowhere. You know, not out of nowhere in the sense that it's all built up to, but you know, you're kind of, you know, you're getting villains like Hammerhead. You're getting, you know, like that, exactly, the Aunt May, Doc Ock wedding, and a Hulk fight, and then this happens.
Yeah, the reemergence of the Green Goblin.
Yeah.
Now, we should point out that when he was, the 2-part that Joe just referenced took place in Canada, and Peter got sick from the sub-zero temperatures. So just like in the story that we covered earlier, he's sick and not on top of his game. And while he stops at the Daily Bugle to sell the photos, you know, Jonah says, get that germ factory out of here or whatever, and kicks him out. And he goes, okay, I don't feel like if I just mail me my check. And, you know,
I think he tell him you should owe me double for getting these Hulk photos.
Yeah. And he goes, but he of course, you know, JJJ doesn't want to hear that. So he kicks him out. And then Robbie says, you know, hang on to your hat. Here are the photos. And while he's gone, Gwen is at his apartment, and you see what might be one of the most chilling panels in a comic book ever, when you can see the Goblin in the window flying towards, you know, Peter's apartment, and you know what's coming, but they don't feel the need to have to show you.
Yeah, it's left up to the imagination
until Peter gets
and even Peter Parker's imagination, like the horror when he goes to the apartment, he discovers the pumpkin.
Yeah,
that's sitting on top of that satchel, and he knows what it means. She's been kidnapped.
No, for sure. And just real quick, some of the stuff that was going on around now in comics in general. We touched on this in one of our other retrospectives, but right after this stuff is when the Avengers Defenders War takes place. You know, it's like it's a month or two after this. And then Wonder Woman's been restored. So she's back to the old powerful Amazon. Nubia's been introduced. So that the first appearance was a couple of months before this, and like the last fight in Wonder Woman 206 takes place while these books are coming out. You have Dave Cockrum on Superboy doing the Legion of Superheroes comics, and Dave Cockrum was at that point the single most popular artist they ever had on the book. This was Superboy 195. Carrie Bates wrote that, and this was the introduction. It was the introduction of Wildfire, but he was still going by like Erg-1 at the time, and it was like his. They thought he died because his essence escaped from his power suit, but he would return later when Mike Grell was on the book. But there's some interesting stuff going on here. It's a lot of Frankie Robbins and Irv Novick on Batman related books. But yeah. Oh, and Luke Cage Hero for Hire is going on now, and Billy Graham is still inking that book, and Englehart's writing it. So you have Englehart writing that, and Defenders and Avengers. It's he was a hot commodity.
So big things happening. Obviously, something enormous is happening here. This might be an event that shocks the entire comic book industry. Because the Spidey sense says, "Hey, I need to go to the George Washington Bridge," and we get this confrontation between Green Goblin and Spider-Man, and we've got Gwen Stacy like kind of hanging in the balance. What's her fate going to be? And Eric, you mentioned something earlier when we were talking. Like, she never gets to say goodbye. There's no interaction between the two once she's kidnapped. That's the last you ever hear of her speaking.
Yeah, and it's not long into the fight when the Goblin knocks her off the bridge, and Spider-Man has a split second to react, and he makes the choice to save her with the webbing. And when he catches her, you see that little snap in the corner. And I guarantee you most people that read the book didn't notice that when it came out, because, again, characters don't die in comics, not like this. So he brings her up, and there's the scene where he goes, where he's back in full quip mode. Not only am I the most dashing hero on two legs, and then he notices she's not moving or breathing, and then just the dialogue, hey kid, I saved you, don't you understand? He goes, you can't be dead. And then he goes, I don't want you to be dead. God, it's just, that's, again, I said, you can just see the comic book industry getting its cap and gown and graduating to adulthood just in those couple of panels. And then you get the Goblin coming back in, and you just hear you just feel the contempt. He's going, you fool, she was dead before your webbing died. He said a fall from that height would kill anybody, but who cares? She doesn't matter, because now I'm going to kill you or whatever. And he goes, and that's when he delivers the line. He goes, wrong. You killed the woman, the only woman I'll ever love her. He goes, and tonight is the night you die, or something, words to that effect. And then that's when you see the title, because they put it on the last page as opposed to the first. And what a holy bleep moment that must have been for anybody reading it new off the shelves. And it still packs more punch, I think, than just about any other comic book death, since. Yeah, it's just incredible, story.
Yeah, and the craftsmanship of Gil Kane, like you watch in these last few pages where they're fighting on the bridge. Just go panel by panel here, and Gil Kane, when he's laying these out, he's using the bridge suspension to move your eye across the panel. And you see, like, he's using in these like dynamic positions for the suspension that's really keeping every panel very engaging. I mean, it's a real, this is like real thoughtful craftsmanship going into these pages.
Also getting across the emotions that Peter is experiencing. He's masked at this point. He doesn't get to use his facial expressions, but he still, completely conveys like he's in agony. And you can see it just like the posture and the pose of the character. And, it's a lot harder to do when you can't, use those facial expressions to get those emotions across. So just fantastic stuff.
Yeah, the page where Gwen is falling and he catches her with the snap, there are less than 40 words on that page. There's this understanding of letting the scene breathe here. You want, like, again, which is a testament to the craft. Like Gerry Conway does a really great job using these sort of bits to speed up and slow down the story. It's a little more dialogue intensive with the thought balloons when he wants you to slow down as Norman's descending into madness, to stew in that a bit. And then, a little dialogue heavy too, with the Green Goblin's coming for Gwen. Again, that's done intentionally. You want the reader to dwell a little more on those pages and moments and really have that sink in. And then once the action starts, you start to see, the pages are freed up a bit. You get some bigger, more dynamic panels. Like this is craft. This is how you craft a comic book.
Yeah, there's a reason it's a key issue. Not only do you have a death of that nature, but it's one of the greatest Spider-Man comics ever written. Mm-hmm. You just don't get impacts like that all the time. Plus, with the way that death has been so, like, nothing feels permanent anymore. But at this moment, I mean, she hasn't come back.
And both Stacys end up in Spider-Man's arms, and in the first one, George gets to tell him,
protect my daughter.
Yeah, but the second one, there's no time for any of that, because there's nothing, and I'm sure that was done by design, because it would have. I'm not gonna say it would have lessened the story, but the fact that they did not get to say goodbye adds to the tragedy of what Peter Parker's life has been, and it's just another example of it. And when you see that going from sadness to absolute rage, and it's hard to tell it within a mask, but you know what's coming.
Yeah, in Spider-Man 122, you don't see this Peter Parker very often, where is he on the verge of losing control, or has he lost control? This is same creative team, the Goblin's last stand. It's confirmed immediately. There's no doubt about it. Gwen Stacy is dead. The Goblin flies. He's promising Spider-Man he's going to join her. Spider-Man swears if anyone's going to die, it's going to be Goblin. There's a little exchange between the two before Peter returns, and he holds her, and you get these two great back-to-back pages. I believe one of them is a full page, and I believe the other one's maybe like a three-quarter page, like splash, and it's just Peter remembering their time together, and it's just gut-wrenching. At this point, there's probably been a month in between release of issues, and just you needed this moment to just think about it and be reminded of all the things that he's lost when this event has occurred, Eric. Just great stuff. Like you mentioned, we've mentioned it so many times, the craftsmanship on the part of Gil Kane. It's next level stuff here.
Yeah, and it's done right before, like I said, he sees that a crowd's gathered at Gwen's body, and he rushes in to protect her. Secret identity be damned. And I love the scene with the two policemen, where the young cop is just so gung-ho. He did it. I know he did. He goes, look at him. And the older cop is saying, I see a man in pain, and you would too if you had eyes. And that he's trying to being protective of her, and then and then when he puts his hand on his shoulder, says, I'm sorry, son, but we've got to take her away. And he goes, well, I don't see what the big rush is. You don't need an ambulance. She's dead, and Spider-Man killed her. Again, there's the guilt talking that he's carried with him from day one. And the rookie cop misinterprets it again. See? And he goes, all right, kid, have it your way. And he goes, you're going to have to come in for questioning. And that's when he snaps. He's like, get away from me. And he goes, I've got things to do. And when I'm done, there's going to be one less green menace. And it seems like they're going, shoot the wound. It's just a great scene. I mean, everything about
Joe, it would have been easy for him to kind of maybe even skip past this part and just get right into the vengeance. I'm sure that's what the fans were wanting, right? You want that vengeance for Peter, but I think to reiterate and give Peter that moment with her, like that last moment with those two together, even though she's obviously not alive anymore, and just to remember all the things that she meant to him, really adds to the nature of the vengeance and how he kind of loses control, and he almost isn't even Peter Parker after he gets out of there.
Yeah, and they hammer that down in the next sequence where he goes to Norman's home to kill him. Basically.
Well, also, he's thinking about, what am I going to tell Harry about Norman's part in killing Gwen?
Yeah, and then he stumbles onto Harry, who's still a mess, and it foreshadows a bit that of the Goblin's demise, that Harry's begging for help, and and Peter's abandoning Harry. That's
completely out of character.
Yeah, it's like, that's it. Like, he's on a mission. Well, they do it this way because we got to see that. We got to see, Robertson and Jameson, and that confrontation. We get him just being really short with he's not even really quipping too much with Jameson. Usually it'd be a little
not at all
lighter. Yeah, but he is. That's it. One person obviously that Peter's not going to go to when this is going on is Aunt May. Yeah. You get the feeling that he wants this as far away from Aunt May as possible.
Plus, she might tell him not to do it.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what he needs to hear right now.
There's a scene in there at the Osborne house that kind of tells you just how driven Peter is, and of course he's going to be, because he just lost the woman he loved. When he says to himself, he's completely useless to me. He's talking about his best friend.
Yeah.
At this moment, none of that matters. But another thing, real quick, this story is almost 50 years old now. Most of the people that have been reading Spider-Man, if you've been reading for decades, probably haven't read this. So it's when the Gwen MJ debate, so many people just dismiss Gwen out of hand.
But it wasn't really a contest at this point, right? It was Gwen.
Right, but no, yeah, absolutely. I said, and there's a scene where Mary Jane is just trashing Peter, and Gwen tells her to shut up and says, you don't talk about him like that. Says, hey, he's all yours. But people that have read all the issues that she, from 31 to 121, why it's a debate and not just an open and shut case, because most people have never read Gwen's stories while she was actually alive in the comics. So I just want to point that out, that, she wasn't just this one-dimensional, useless character that was holding, MJ's placeholder before she got, Peter. So I said, and that's why I said this death is so important, because she was an important character for years.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And when they finally meet on the rooftop, we got the Green Goblin versus Spider-Man, and this is it. One of them's going to walk away, and one of them isn't. And that's the feeling you get going into it. It's very classic art. The sequencing is phenomenal, like you've already mentioned, Joe. You can't say enough good things about Gil Kane's work in here. And then, the Green Goblin reactivates his glider, tries to impale Peter on the rooftop. Peter's got his spider senses, realizes what's happening, and essentially Green Goblin kills himself and impales himself.
Yeah, and again, to stress the craft here, there's a few panels that are just setup panels here right before he confronts Green Goblin. And it's just got captions, just describing, where they're going downtown, where they're going to have this final confrontation. And again, this is intentional. People now might look at this and go, what? You don't need these words here. Just, just get to the action. Just, I show, don't tell. Those people are idiots, because what they're trying to do here is slow you down. They want you to think about this before you go into the final confrontation. Because then things pick up and get chaotic. So this is done intentionally to slow the reader down and get you sucked into what's happening.
Get you ready for the moment before all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
And what was really cool about the setup to this was Spider-Man goes to Joe Robertson with a plan. It says, does Norman Osborn have any, what does he own, any warehouses or theaters or anything like that that I may not know about or whatever? And then, of course, Jameson comes in, runs his mouth, and Spider-Man quickly webs it. But there's another scene during the fight which really kind of gives you the idea of just how insane Norman is. When Peter wrecks his glider and he says, "I will punish you for that." And Spider-Man goes, "Are we living in the same universe?" He goes, "The woman I love is dead and you're worried about a hunk of metal." Mm. And then that's when he just beats the you-know-what out of him. And of course the glider isn't as destroyed as he thought. And it activates and comes at him while Peter's he stops, he goes, "What am I doing?" He goes, "If I don't stop, I will become like him, a murderer." And that's when the glider starts coming at him. And of course, that's when his spider sense comes off. That and Norman laughing maniacally would have been a clue also. But he ducks and that just like the way they wrote that, it's just like, sometimes you die with just a whimper or whatever, as he's impaled there. And again, you couldn't ask for a more effective ending.
Yeah.
Because again, he got no time to monologue, just die.
Yeah.
So, perfect, symmetry between the ends of the two issues. Both deaths were silent.
Yeah. He just, you get these, it's a quick "yeah," and then it's just a series of sound effects over multiple panels. That's done to stress how pathetic the death is. You get chunk, sput, 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 hiss, hiss, thump. And that's it.
And they're not alone here. Peter thinks he's alone, but somebody has witnessed this.
Mm-hmm.
Who is that, Eric Breen?
I'm not sure. I don't think they even knew when they did it. Because I think they ended up saying it was Harry.
Yeah.
But I'm not buying that because he couldn't.
Doesn't make sense.
Together. No.
I was like, I think this is supposed to be Harry, but he's like a puddle of goo in that apartment. Like he can't even take care of himself.
I don't even, when I read this story, I just kind of dismiss that. But what the dialogue leading up to that, when Spider-Man says, "Funny, you expected death, even somebody like Norman's, to mean something," because, but it just doesn't. It just, I'd feel empty. And it just, again, we've asked the questions, the best, best miniseries, best this, best that, best 2 issues. This is it. Sorry, Days of Future Past fans. This is the best 2-issue story arc in comics history, period.
And on the final note, Peter returns home. MJ's somewhat waiting for him. I think she thinks she's eating. He tells her it's time for her to leave, and she stays and comforts him. And I guess it's a foreshadowing of the change in their relationship as well, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great page. It's 9 panels. It's you have Peter really lace into her.
Yeah,
he's really cruel to her. And then it's, she hesitates for a moment. And then those last 3 panels are silent. And it's her contemplating. She almost leaves, but she shuts the door and decides to stay to comfort Peter. Again, really powerful. That one page could be a one-page comic.
Story.
Yeah, that's a story.
Yeah.
That is an entire story right there.
Yeah. The craftsmanship, the execution on both these is off the charts. It's amazing to think Gerry Conway's 20 years old. Yeah. I was 20 years old. I think I might have been I was in England in the Air Force at the time. Where were you when you were 20, Eric? Could you have written a comic this good?
I might have deluded myself into thinking I could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe, had you even written a comic by this point in your life?
I had done I hadn't written comics, but I'd written prose, fan fiction, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I believe I had written a Fifth Doctor Peter Davison Nyssa fan fiction at some point. But yeah, it's
you're getting ready for your career, but Gerry Conway's well into it. He's already has he written the best story he's ever going to write in his entire career by this point? Eric Breen says yes.
I mean, he's come close. He hasn't written anything more impactful. I'm sure you could probably make some arguments of like maybe there are stories where he feels they were technically more like stronger, but that's what happens. I mean, this happens with everyone. This happens with musicians. Like try to find a band that quickly admits their best album was one of their first two albums or something like that.
The first track we did was actually the high moment. I didn't realize it.
You don't want to do that, but Gerry also did a lot of really great work. I mean, this whole Spider-Man.
I'm not trying to diminish it, but it's just crazy that he did this early in his career. Like, wow.
No, it's crazy, especially again, like I was saying before. When you talk about it was only a few months or so before this that there was the goofy "we got to stop Aunt May from marrying Doc Ock" issue, and I say goofy lovingly. I don't say it in scorn, but
actually, that happened in 131. Mm-hmm. The story you're talking about was when Aunt May took him in as a boarder.
Right. Yeah. Before this was the when he's fighting Doc Ock and Hammerhead, and
they recycled the politician angle from the second Spectacular magazine.
Yeah,
but another reason, if you wonder why Gerry Conway could never top this, go look at his bibliography from the 70s. There are less books written by the rest of comics than Gerry Conway. It seems like it's unbelievable, his output.
Yeah, at Marvel and DC.
Yes.
Yeah, he's done all the major characters. Wonderful career, and he started out with a bang. Like, it's crazy. When you look back and they go, well, what makes Peter Parker Spider-Man special? How do we recreate that? It's moments like this, Joe. It's impactful moments where you've invested in the character and you've almost bled with it. Like you've experienced these losses and these tragedies, and you've seen him overcome them, time and time again in his life. And that's how you build a character that has staying power. We've seen this with Batman, Superman, other characters, and that's the craft involved. These things don't happen overnight for the most part. It takes years of dedication, stories, just developing the characters, and really that bond with the reader that I don't know that the industry has a whole lot of stomach to do anymore, but that's how you do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, Gerry, loved comics. It's very obvious. What he was able to do in Spider-Man, I mean, it was unbelievable that someone could take the reins from Stan and do something this good. I don't think I don't think there was a single writer that took over immediately after Stan and did nearly as good as Gerry Conway here on Spider-Man. It's incredible to think about it. And what Gerry did, at some point, we're going to make you read some Gerry Conway Batman. I'm sure, Wes. We'll get there eventually, but no, it's weird because people are kind of aware of Gerry Conway, but I feel like a lot of people just know him as like some old guy on Twitter now, and don't fully comprehend the incredible impact he's had on the industry. In addition to creating the Punisher, not too many issues after this. And yeah, I mean, you could go on and on. There was what was it? There was an episode of Comic Book Men where Stan Lee was on it, and he's trying to think of the name of the guy who killed Gwen Stacy, and one of the guys on there goes like, "Oh, Gerry Conway," and he says, "Oh, I forgot the guy's name because I still hate him. And they all laugh about it. And, it's a shame. You can read some stuff up on this. There's a bunch of statements that Gerry Conway has made. He's written intros and outros to different things. And in very Stan fashion, he was okay with the idea. Even if he may have been hesitant, but was kind of like, well, I'm not writing the book, you are. I'm, if that's what you guys think. Because Roy Thomas was editing the book. So, there's a certain level of, all right, Roy, if you think this is what we should do. But like other things, like when they killed Aunt May in Amazing 400 and other times, he would then renege that publicly and be like, no one told me that this was going to happen. And, threw Gerry under the bus, and Gerry wasn't thrilled by that because he was getting a lot of hate mail. There were a lot of people at the time hated it. And this is why sometimes you need to step back and get some distance from some things. I'm sure we've all read a comic that at the time we were like, this isn't good. And then looking back, you go like, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe I was in the heat of the moment or something like that, and looking back. But this is two issues that are held in such high regard that you wouldn't think people would have absolutely hated when they came out. Just the deluge of angry letters. And it's interesting putting that in perspective as well.
Well, it certainly was a change. It's something I hadn't really experienced before, and I bet it caught him off guard. Eric, this is a great read. Very impactful stuff. You just it takes a while before you can execute things on this level. I'll let you have the last word. Obviously, this one went a little bit longer than our other retrospectives. I knew it was going to. When I read the issues, I took the notes. I was like, there's literally nothing you can gloss over here. You have to talk about all of it because it's also important to get you to the final moment. So what are your final words on the death of George Stacy, the death of Gwen Stacy?
Just the impact that both stories had. And if you haven't read, most people have at least read those two issues. And a lot of people have read probably the death of George Stacy as well. But if you haven't read the issues that followed or the ones that precede them, read a handful up to that point and then a handful after, because the impacts are felt for several issues, actually continuously. And then the same with after the death of Gwen Stacy, the way his relationship with Harry changes, his relationship with Mary Jane changes, and just the changes in his life. It was unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, Ross Andru took over as the artist, and I shortchanged him by saying unfortunately, because he was a tremendous Spider-Man artist in his own right, but it was different looking. But the story was consistent, and recommend to anybody that hasn't read those, go out and read those. There's just great stuff. It's not just these stories; it's what came before and after.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a reason Spider-Man's on the Mount Rushmore of comics, and it's because of stories like this. So thank you all so much. This is a great retrospective. A lot of fun reading. Next time, what are we doing next week? Do we know?
We haven't decided yet.
We haven't decided yet.
We'll figure it out.
Something.
It's going to be good.
It's going to be great.